A 4-year-old girl was locked in a cage until Millionaire saw her said, "She's not a stray animal." Why was a 4-year-old girl found locked in an animal cage on a desolate farm? A visiting millionaire demands her release. But the truly shocking twist isn't just her horrifying condition. It's uncovering the powerful, seemingly respectable man running the cruel operation she escaped. Like, subscribe, and listen now to hear Elon's incredible story of rescue and resilience. The smell hit Henry Shaw first, a sickening miasma of ammonia, decaying hay, and something else, something metallic and rank, clinging to the humid Louisiana air. He pushed open the warped wooden door of the dilapidated outbuilding, squinting into the dim, dusty interior. Sunlight struggled through grime-coated windows, illuminating motes dancing in the stale air and casting long, distorted shadows. His architects had dismissed this structure as tear-down, irrelevant to the survey of the sprawling, neglected property, but something, a flicker of movement glimpsed through a crack, perhaps, or just a nagging instinct, had drawn Henry closer. His eyes adjusted to the gloom. Piles of junk littered the dirt floor, rusted tools, torn feed sacks, discarded tires. Then he saw it, tucked in the furthest, darkest corner. A cage. A large, rusted metal cage, the kind used for transporting livestock or large dogs. And inside the cage, huddled on a thin, filthy blanket, was a small, dark shape. Not an animal. A child. A little girl, maybe 3 or 4 years old, with wide, terrified eyes staring out from a tangle of matted curly hair. She wore only a ragged t-shirt, her small body curled tight, clutching a soiled, handmade doll. The air thickened, heavy with disbelief and a sudden, chilling horror. A tin plate with dried crust lay just inside the bars. The metallic clang of a chain echoed slightly as the child shifted, pulling her knees tighter to her chest. She made no sound, just stared, her eyes vast pools of fear in the dimness. Henry felt the air leave his lungs, his mind struggling to reconcile the scene before him. A child, in a cage, like an animal. Who could do this? Why? The questions hammered at him, drowned out by the sudden, overwhelming roar of protective fury rising in his chest. Henry Shaw, at 50, presided over Shaw Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar empire built on cutting-edge medical technology and healthcare services. He was a man accustomed to boardrooms, complex negotiations, and the sterile precision of scientific innovation. His success was legendary, his intellect sharp, his philanthropy extensive but always strategic, managed through his foundation. Yet, beneath the tailored suits and the reserved, analytical demeanor resided a quiet solitude. A widower for over a decade, having lost his wife to a sudden illness, he'd thrown himself into his work, building Shaw Enterprises into a global leader. But the sprawling mansion felt empty, the accolades hollow. He lacked connection, a deeper purpose beyond profit margins and technological breakthroughs. This led him to his most personal project yet, the planned Shaw Center for Child Resilience, a state-of-the-art residential facility dedicated to the psychological treatment of severely traumatized children. It was a project born partly from a desire to give back in a more meaningful way, and partly, perhaps, from the lingering ache of his own childless marriage and subsequent loneliness. He envisioned a sanctuary, a place where cutting-edge therapy met compassionate care, helping young lives heal from unimaginable wounds. He'd chosen rural Louisiana for the center's location, seeking privacy, space, and a tranquil environment away from urban stressors. The specific property, a large, neglected former farmstead bordered by bayous and dense woods, was perfect, remote, expansive, available for a reasonable price. Its dilapidated state didn't deter him. He saw potential, envisioning modern therapeutic cottages replacing crumbling outbuildings, healing gardens flourishing where weeds now grew. He'd flown down personally from New York to walk the property with his lead architect and a survey team, wanting to get a feel for the land himself before finalizing the purchase. Louisiana's landscape held a certain mystique for him. Beautiful, wild, but also hinting at hidden poverty and forgotten corners where problems could fester unnoticed. He knew the region faced challenges, pockets of extreme poverty, underfunded social services, areas where isolation could breed neglect or worse. He hoped his center could be a beacon of hope, bringing resources and expertise to vulnerable children in the area. He arrived on site, the humid afternoon, focused on drainage patterns, soil composition, and building placement, his mind occupied with the logistical complexities of his ambitious project, never imagining he was about to step out of the world of corporate strategy and into a raw, immediate confrontation with the very kind of human darkness his center aimed to combat. Henry signaled his team to continue surveying the main fields while he took a closer look at the cluster of outbuildings near the property line. The main farmhouse was derelict, but salvageable. The barns, however, looked ready to collapse. He was about to dismiss them entirely when he noticed the one set slightly apart, its door slightly ajar, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like a stifled whimper, catching his ear over the buzz of cicadas. Curiosity piqued. He pushed through the tall weeds towards it. The hinges creaked loudly as he pushed the door open, stepping inside, leading directly to the horrifying discovery of the little girl locked in the animal cage. As Henry stood frozen in shock, a figure detached itself from the shadows near the back wall. A man, rough-featured, mid-40s, dressed in stained overalls, wiping grease from his hands onto a rag. Victor Hargrove. He eyed Henry with open suspicion, then gestured dismissively towards the cage. Just a stray kid I found wandering. Keeping her safe till the sheriff can pick her up. Property's private, mister. The casual lie, the utter lack of concern in the man's voice as he spoke about the child caged like a dog, snapped Henry out of his stupor. The stray kid flinched back as Hargrove spoke. Henry's blood ran cold with fury. A stray, Henry repeated, his voice dangerously low, stepping further into the dim light, his expensive shoes crunching on the debris-strewn floor. He ignored Hargrove, walking directly towards the cage, crouching down so he was level with the terrified child inside. Her eyes were huge, dark, filled with a fear so profound it felt ancient. "My God," Henry breathed, reaching a hand towards the bars, stopping when she recoiled. He looked back at Hargrove, his own eyes now blazing. "She is not a stray animal. Open this cage. Now." Hargrove shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing the unexpected authority radiating from the well-dressed stranger. "Look, buddy, I told you. Open it," Henry commanded, his voice cutting like steel. "Or the very next call I make is to 911, followed by my lawyers. And trust me, you don't want that." He pulled out his satellite phone, essential in this remote area. The threat, combined with Henry's imposing presence, seemed to work. Hargrove spat on the ground, but fumbled with a large padlock on the cage door, unlocking it with a rusty click. This was the inciting incident, the horrific discovery, and the immediate confrontation. Henry's reaction was visceral, instantaneous. All thoughts of property surveys vanished, replaced by an overwhelming protective instinct and cold rage. As Hargrove swung the cage door open, Henry gently reached inside. "It's okay," he murmured to the little girl, his voice softer now. "I'm Henry. I'm going to help you." The child just stared, trembling. Carefully, Henry lifted her small, frail body out of the cage. She was light as a bird. He immediately shrugged off his expensive suit jacket and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders, shielding her from the squalor and Hargrove's resentful glare. His mind was already racing. Call 911 done. Call his corporate medical director for immediate transport coordination to a top pediatric facility. Call his head of security. Call legal. Alert Child Protective Services. His initial goal was crystal clear. Ensure this child's immediate safety, get her comprehensive medical and psychological care, and bring the full force of the law down on the person responsible for putting her in that cage. He carried the little girl out into the sunlight, shielding her eyes, leaving Hargrove standing amidst the filth as the first sirens wailed in the distance. Part 4. Rising Action. First Steps Va Complications, 1,500 words. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of coordinated action orchestrated by Henry Shaw's resources. Sheriff's deputies arrived, taking a sullen Victor Hargrove into custody. An ambulance, dispatched at Henry's insistence, bypassing slower local protocols, carefully transported the little girl, still nameless, almost entirely nonverbal, to a leading pediatric hospital in Baton Rouge affiliated with Shaw Enterprises. Henry rode with her, holding her small hand, offering quiet reassurance she seemed too traumatized to comprehend. Initial medical exams revealed severe malnutrition, dehydration, developmental delays, and profound psychological trauma, but thankfully, no signs of acute physical injury beyond neglect. Child Protective Services, CPS, was notified, but Henry, leveraging his influence and guaranteeing all expenses, ensured she wouldn't be immediately lost in the overwhelmed foster system. He arranged for her transfer, once medically stable, to a private, highly regarded therapeutic facility associated with DR. Clara Evans, the renowned child psychologist he had already tapped to lead his planned resilience center. DR. Evans met Elin, a name tentatively assigned by hospital staff, meaning light, which resonated with Henry, upon her arrival at the facility. She found a child deeply withdrawn, communicating only through silent observation, flinching from touch, her eyes holding the haunting vacancy of severe trauma. Clara began the slow, painstaking process of building trust through play therapy, art therapy, and a safe, predictable environment. Henry, meanwhile, turned his attention to the legal and investigative side. Hargrove's arrest was just the beginning. His initial statements were inconsistent, claiming he'd found the girl abandoned weeks ago and was just looking after her poorly. Henry didn't believe him. Who was this girl? Were her parents? How did Hargrove end up as her caretaker on that specific, isolated property? He tasked his formidable corporate legal team and private investigators, discreetly hired former federal agents, to dig deep. Complications mounted quickly. No missing person reports seemed to match Elin. Hargrove had few known associates and lived off the grid. The farm property itself was owned by a tangled web of shell corporations, making the true ownership obscure. Initial searches of the squalid barn yielded little beyond confirming the horrific conditions Elin endured. The cage, meager scraps of food, no toys except the one handmade doll. Hargrove, facing neglect and endangerment charges, wasn't talking. Henry's investigators hit bureaucratic walls trying to trace the shell corporations. It felt like someone was deliberately obscuring the trail. Simultaneously, Henry wrestled with his own unexpected emotional response. He couldn't get the image of Elin's terrified eyes out of his mind. He felt a fierce, protective responsibility that went beyond philanthropy. He started visiting the therapeutic facility daily, following DR. Evan's strict guidelines. He wouldn't enter Ellen's therapy room initially, simply sitting in the hallway outside her door for an hour each afternoon around 4 p.m., sometimes reading a children's book aloud softly, sometimes just sitting in silence, letting her get accustomed to his quiet, non-threatening presence through the open doorway. He'd leave small, simple gifts outside her door after he left. A new box of crayons, a smooth stone from his pocket, a soft toy animal. He expected nothing in return, content to simply be a steady presence. Progress was measured in millimeters. Elin remained largely silent, interacting primarily with Clara through drawing or pointing. Yet Clara noted that Elin seemed aware of Henry's visits, sometimes pausing her play to listen when he read, occasionally glancing towards the hallway where he sat. The mystery of her past remained locked away, and the investigation into who put her in that cage seemed stalled, overshadowed by the immense challenge of reaching the traumatized child herself. Weeks turned into a month, then two. Elin remained under Clara Evans's dedicated care, slowly showing infinitesimal signs of adapting to the safe environment, though still profoundly withdrawn and mostly nonverbal. Henry maintained his quiet, daily vigil outside her room, his presence becoming a predictable part of her otherwise unstructured days. He never pushed, never demanded interaction, simply existed as a calm, constant presence. His investigative team, meanwhile, finally had a breakthrough. By meticulously tracing financial records associated with the Shell Corporation owning the farm, they uncovered links to a supposedly defunct nonprofit organization called Children of the Delta, which had solicited donations online years ago using vague appeals for impoverished rural children. Further digging revealed that the director and sole signatory for this defunct charity was a man named Malcolm Reed, a prominent New Orleans businessman known for his outward philanthropy and real estate developments, but also rumored in certain circles to cut corners and associate with shady characters. The connection felt significant, but still circumstantial. How did Reed connect to Hargrove and the little girl in the cage? The turning point came not from the investigation, but from Elin herself. One rainy afternoon, as Henry sat reading softly in the hallway, Elin, who had been drawing intensely with Clara inside the room, suddenly got up. She walked silently to the doorway, clutching a piece of paper. She hesitated, looking at Henry with her large, unreadable eyes, then quickly placed the drawing on the floor just outside her room before retreating back inside. Henry's heart leaped. It was the first time she had initiated any kind of contact, however small. He picked up the drawing carefully. It was rendered in childish, shaky crayon lines, depicting a dark, cage-like structure under a scribbled roof, the barn. Inside the cage was a small figure. Outside stood two larger figures, one rough and menacing, clearly Hargrove, the other taller, holding something that looked like a phone or camera pointed at the cage. And next to them, a crudely drawn but distinct picture of a large white truck with a specific, three-pronged red logo on its side. Henry stared at the drawing, a jolt going through him. He recognized that logo. He'd seen it briefly on a dilapidated panel truck half hidden behind the barn during his initial property survey. His security team had already identified it as belonging to a regional transport company, a company whose board included Malcolm Reed. This was the critical revelation, the midpoint that connected all the threads. Elin wasn't just a victim of Hargrove's neglect. She was likely part of a larger, organized exploitation scheme run by Reed, using the fake charity, the transport company, and likely Hargrove as muscle or caretaker. The cameraman in her drawing was probably Reed or his associate, filming Elin or other children in stage squalor for fraudulent donation appeals. The horror of it washed over Henry, the calculated cruelty, the exploitation hidden behind Reed's philanthropic facade. He looked at Elon's drawing again, this time focusing on the small figure inside the cage. His resolve hardened into cold fury. This wasn't just about rescuing one child anymore. It was about dismantling Reed's entire sickening operation and bringing him to justice. He immediately shared the drawing and his realization with Clara and his investigators. Elon's drawing, born of trauma but representing a courageous act of communication, had just blown the case wide open. There was no going back. Henry Shaw, billionaire philanthropist, was now on a personal mission to destroy Malcolm Reed. Elon's drawing, particularly the distinct truck logo, became the key that unlocked the investigation. Henry's team focused intensely on Malcolm Reed and his network. They discovered the transport company, partially owned by Reed, had made numerous unexplained trips to the remote farm property over the past 2 years. Financial forensics revealed laundered money flowing from online donation platforms associated with the defunct Children of the Delta charity into accounts controlled by Reed. They found evidence that Reed had acquired several other remote, rundown properties through shell corporations, suggesting the farm might not have been the only location used. The picture emerging was one of systematic fraud and child exploitation, potentially involving multiple children, hidden behind Reed's carefully crafted public image. Henry authorized his team to use every legal resource available, coordinating discreetly with sympathetic contacts within state law enforcement and the FBI's Child Exploitation Task Force, feeding them the intelligence gathered. Official investigations began gaining traction, but Reed was well insulated, protected by lawyers and his influential connections. Building an airtight case would take time. Meanwhile, Henry's relationship with Elon continued its slow, delicate evolution. Encouraged by her breakthrough with the drawing, he began spending brief periods inside the therapy room during sessions with Clara, always sitting quietly, letting Elon control the proximity. She started acknowledging his presence more directly, sometimes handing him a crayon or pointing to something she'd drawn. Her vocabulary remained extremely limited, but she began using single words occasionally, calm and dark. One afternoon, while looking at a picture book about animals, Elon pointed to a drawing of a father bear holding a cub and then pointed at Henry, whispering the word "daddy." It was tentative, questioning, but it struck Henry to the core. Clara cautioned him it likely reflected Elon's need for a safe, protective figure rather than a true understanding of the word, but the emotional impact on Henry was profound. He felt an overwhelming surge of paternal love and protectiveness for this wounded child. It solidified his commitment not just to finding justice for her, but to being a permanent fixture in her life, whatever that might entail legally. He started consulting with adoption lawyers specializing in complex trauma cases, understanding the long road ahead if he chose that path. Clara Evans continued her patient work, using Elon's drawings as a therapeutic tool. Elon drew the cameraman frequently, sometimes depicting him as large and shadowy, other times showing his face with surprising details that closely matched photos of Malcolm Reed. She drew other children in cages, confirming Henry's fear that she wasn't the only victim. She drew the white truck being loaded with boxes, sometimes showing small figures near it. Each drawing was a painful fragment of memory, carefully documented by Clara, providing potential leads for investigators about other locations or victims. Henry's team managed to track down and discreetly approach a former employee of Reed's transport company, someone who had quit abruptly a year earlier. After assurances of protection and potential immunity, negotiated carefully by Henry's lawyers liaising with prosecutors, the employee agreed to talk. He confirmed Reed used the company's trucks and warehouses for illicit activities, including transporting scared, silent children between remote properties. He had witnessed Reed and his assistant filming children in deplorable conditions. He didn't know the full extent, but his testimony corroborated Elin's drawings and the financial evidence. He also mentioned Reed often bragged about being untouchable, recording incriminating conversations with associates as insurance. Could such recordings exist? It was a long shot, but it planted an idea for leveraging Reed's own paranoia. The investigation was building momentum, but Reed remained a powerful, dangerous target. With the former employee's testimony providing critical corroboration, state and federal authorities felt confident moving forward more overtly against Malcolm Reed. Subpoenas were issued, known associates interviewed, financial institutions compelled to release records. Reed, realizing the net was closing, reacted predictably. He lawyered up aggressively, launched a public relations campaign painting himself as a victim of corporate rivalry, implying Henry Shaw was targeting him for business reasons, and likely began shredding documents and intimidating potential witnesses. Henry's investigators reported that key figures connected to Reed suddenly became unavailable or changed their stories. The informant who provided the recording of Reed giving orders, as mentioned in the original summary, let's assume the ex-employee provided this, or another source was found, went into protective custody, fearing retaliation. The investigation hit a critical phase. They had strong evidence, but Reed was fighting back hard, using his wealth and influence to obstruct and discredit. Henry faced immense pressure. His board of directors at Shaw Enterprises expressed concern about the resources and potential negative publicity associated with his personal crusade against Reed. The media narrative was becoming muddied by Reed's counter-accusations. Henry poured millions into both the investigation and accelerating the completion of the Elin's Light Children's Center, needing a tangible symbol of his commitment to contrast with Reed's corruption. His visits with Elin became his sanctuary amidst the storm. She was slowly beginning to talk more, forming simple sentences, occasionally smiling. She consistently referred to him as Daddy Henry, now, a title he cherished more than CEO. Clara believed Elin was making remarkable progress, but cautioned that the trauma was deep and recovery would be lifelong. She worried about the potential impact of a public trial on Elin, even if she wasn't required to testify directly. The final test came as the investigation seemed poised to result in indictments, but lacked the one piece of irrefutable evidence that could guarantee a swift conviction and expose the full depravity of Reed's operation, something directly from Reed himself, beyond the informant's recording. Henry's legal team, working with federal agents, devised a high-risk plan. Learning Reed felt untouchable and often conducted sensitive business from his lavish penthouse office, they obtained warrants for targeted electronic surveillance, hoping to capture incriminating conversations. It was a race against time, needing the evidence before Reed could destroy it or flee. Days turned into anxious weeks. They intercepted coded calls, financial transactions, but nothing concrete enough to be a smoking gun regarding the direct exploitation of the children. Henry felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. Had he pushed too hard, too publicly? Would Reed slip away? His dark night was filled with doubt, not about his cause, but about his ability to deliver justice for Elin and the other potential victims against such a cunning adversary. He doubled down, pouring more resources into the surveillance, praying for a break before Reed shut everything down. He drew strength from Elin's quiet resilience, her tentative trust a constant reminder of what was at stake. The break came unexpectedly. Surveillance picked up a heated video call between Malcolm Reed and Victor Hargrove, who was cooperating from jail, likely wearing a wire as part of a deal negotiated by prosecutors leveraging Henry's evidence. Hargrove, playing his part, expressed fear about taking the fall alone, demanding more money and assurances from Reed. Reed, arrogant and believing the call secure, finally lost his temper. "You idiot!" Reed snarled, his face contorted with rage on the surveillance feed. "You got paid to keep quiet and keep the livestock contained. Those videos made millions for the Delta Fund. Nobody cares about those kids. Just shut up and do your time like planned." It was the smoking gun, directed mission of the scheme, dehumanizing language, confirmation of the fake charity link. Federal agents moved instantly. The Eland's Light Children's Center dedication ceremony was scheduled for the following day. Henry, Clara, and the lead prosecutor decided to synchronize the public announcement with Reed's arrest. As Henry stood at the podium during the ceremony, speaking emotionally about the center's mission to heal children from trauma, drawing inspiration from a brave little light, federal marshals and FBI agents stormed Malcolm Reed's penthouse office across the state. News helicopters captured Reed, being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Back at the ceremony, the U.S. attorney took the podium after Henry, formally announcing Reed's arrest and detailing the charges: racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and multiple counts related to child exploitation and endangerment under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. He credited the initial discovery by Mr. Shaw and the subsequent multi-agency investigation. A collective gasp went through the audience, followed by stunned applause. Eland, standing safely beside Clara Evans near the stage, her presence carefully managed to shield her from media intrusion, but allow her to witness the moment if she chose. Watch silently, clutching Henry's hand, her expression solemn but no longer fearful. Justice, swift and decisive, had finally arrived. Malcolm Reed's arrest and the subsequent trial exposed the full extent of his depraved operation. The evidence, including financial records, informant testimony, Hargrove's cooperation, Eland's drawings, presented carefully by Clara to illustrate the conditions without re-traumatizing Eland, and Reed's own recorded words, led to swift convictions. Reed received a sentence of well over 20 years in federal prison. Victor Hargrove received a reduced sentence for his cooperation, but still faced significant jail time. Authorities were able to identify and rescue several other children who had been exploited by Reed's network, placing them in specialized care, some eventually finding homes at the Eland's Light Center. Henry Shaw formally completed the process of adopting Eland. With the security of a permanent, loving home and continued therapy from Clara Evans, who became the center's clinical director, Eland blossomed. She started school, made friends, learned to laugh freely, though the scars of her past remained, managed with ongoing support. The Eland's Light Center became a model institution, funded generously by Shaw Enterprises and Henry personally, pioneering new approaches to trauma recovery in children. Henry found unexpected joy and fulfillment in fatherhood, his life transformed by the little girl he found in a cage. His corporate work continued, but his focus shifted, prioritizing the center and his daughter above all else. He established a foundation to combat child exploitation and support similar recovery centers globally. Years later, one might find Henry and a vibrant, happy teenage Eland working side by side in the center's thriving garden, planting flowers under the Louisiana sun, a quiet testament to resilience, the enduring power of hope, and the extraordinary light that emerged from the darkest of corners.